I can still remember the smell of that bus. A mix of diesel, sweat, old plastic, and cheap hope. I was holding my backpack tight against my chest, like everything I was lived inside it. And honestly, it kind of did. A change of clothes, a jacket that didn't really fit, a crumpled photos of my mom and my brothers, and an envelope with those $200 that felt like a fortune and nothing at the same time. My name is Mariella, and when I crossed the US border, I was 24 with no real plan you could actually call a plan. What I had was a "we'll figure it out later" and a sentence ID repeated so many times it turned into a prayer. There, it's gonna be different. But it wasn't. At least, not at first. When I got off the bus, it was still dark. The wind hit my face like it was mad at me for choosing that place. I had only seen snow in movies. It wasn't snow that night, but it was the deepest cold I had ever felt. The kind of cold that doesn't care about jackets, that cuts through fabric, slips down your neck, and goes straight for your heart. The city looked bigger than anything I could wrap my mind around. Buildings with lights still on, cars flying by, signs blinking in English. I recognized some words, pretended to recognize others. I remember seeing the word cleaning on a sign and thinking, that one I know, cleaning I understand. Almost like a joke from fate, a girl named Diana, a friend of my cousin's friend, had agreed to pick me up. I didn't know her face, she didn't know mine. Just a quick description by text. Bolivian, short, hair tied back, blue backpack. That was me, a nationality, a height, a hairstyle, and a backpack. She showed up half an hour later, looking around fast, aircoat open, her phone in her hand. When our eyes met, she smiled like she was relieved. Mariella. He just nodded because it felt like my voice had stayed in another country. Inside the car, the heater was on, but I was still shaking. Maybe it wasn't just the cold anymore. Diana talked fast, mixing Spanish, Portuguese, and English. I understood about half of it. "You'll share a room with some girls," she said. "Rent's expensive, but if you work hard, you can make it. There's work. There's always cleaning work." Cleaning. That word had been stuck to me since I was a kid. I grew up helping my mom clean houses for people richer than us, back in Bolivia. But at least back home, I got the jokes. I knew the flavor of the food. I recognized the songs on the radio. Sitting in that car, I felt like a stranger inside my own life. When we got to the apartment, the hallway smelled like cigarettes and mold. The old building looked tired, like it had seen too many stories, just like mine. In the room, there were 2 bunk beds and a mattress on the floor. 3 girls shared that tiny space. You could barely open a backpack without bumping into someone. "That top bunk over there is empty," Diana said, pointing. "You can stay there. Later, you talk to the girls about rent." One of the girls, darker-skinned with long straight hair down to her waist, just looked me up and down without smiling. Another, pale with deep dark circles under her eyes, nodded and went back to her phone. The third was asleep, wrapped in 2 blankets. I put my backpack at the foot of the bunk bed and took a deep breath. That night, lying on a strange mattress, listening to snores, phone notifications, and the distant noise of the street, the loneliness hit me so hard it almost hurt physically. My body was there in that improvised bed, but my mind was still walking through my mother's house, smelling her black coffee, hearing the pots clattering, the yelling of my younger brothers. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Not on the first day. I was scared that if I started, I wouldn't be able to stop. The next day, Diana woke me up by shaking my leg. "Get up, Mariella. I found you a gig. Office cleaning. It's early morning. The pay's low, but it's a start." I looked at the old clock on the wall. 3:30 in the morning. My body was begging for more sleep, but the need was louder. I couldn't spend those $200. They weren't money. They were my thin line between this might work and going back home defeated. I put on a pair of tight jeans, a long-sleeve shirt, and my worn-out jacket. I didn't know that would become my battle outfit for the next few months. On the way to the office, Diana tried to teach me a few English phrases. Trash is garbage. Mop is the thing you clean the floor with. Restroom is bathroom. If someone says faster, they want you to move quicker. And if they say not good, eat man stay re-complaining. Repeated the words under my breath like I was practicing a spell. But honestly, I just felt illiterate all over again. The building we were supposed to clean was huge, all glass walls. During the day, it was probably beautiful. At night, empty and lit by harsh white lights, it looked like the set of a sad movie. The supervisor was waiting in the lobby. A man in his 50s, big belly, tired face, badge hanging around his neck. He said something fast in English. I froze. Diana answered for me, laughing nervously. She's new. Got here yesterday. She learns fast. She promised. He looked me up and down with that mix of suspicion and boredom. Then he pointed at the cleaning cart. That part didn't need translation. The first few hours were a physical shock. The cleaning chemicals burned my hands. The strong smell went straight up my nose and into my head. I swept, mopped, cleaned bathrooms, scrubbed stains out of the carpet. My reflection showed up warped in the glass doors. A girl with her hair tied back, lost eyes, quick steps. At one point, I walked into a huge conference room with a shiny table and spinning chairs. In the corner, there was a telecom screen turned off. Some papers scattered around, expensive pens. I stood at the doorway for a few seconds, staring at that world that wasn't mine. In that place, I only existed to erase the traces of whoever had been there, like I was some kind of useful ghost showing up when nobody was watching, wiping everything clean, and disappearing again. I remembered something my mom used to say when we cleaned rich people's houses back home. Look closely, daughter. We might not have anything, but our eyes are free. Learn from what you see. So I started paying attention. The organized desks, the framed pictures on the walls, the expensive computers, the badges with English names and important titles. I didn't understand the words, but I understood that decisions were made there. Money? Probably. Deals. Futures. Lives. By the end of the shift, my back felt like someone had stacked weights on my shoulders. I could feel blisters forming on my feet, and the smell of chemicals was stuck to my clothes and hair. The supervisor handed us a brown envelope. Inside, there were a few crumpled bills. I had no idea if it was a lot or a little. I only knew my body had paid for every single dollar. Back in the room, the girls were getting ready for their other jobs. One was going to wait tables at a restaurant. Another was going to babysit. The third was heading to a laundry place. Life, there was like an endless relay of exhaustion. One slept, another left, another came back. It was like time had turned into a rug that never stopped being shaken out. After a few days, the routine felt like it wanted to swallow me whole. Wake up before dawn, catch the bus, clean offices, come back to the tight room, take a quick shower, eat something cheap, call home when I could. On those calls with my mom, I lied. I told her I was fine, that people were kind, that the city was beautiful. But the truth was, the second I hung up, a huge emptiness opened up inside me. One night, everything almost fell apart. I was cleaning a bathroom and tripped over the bucket. Dirty water spread across the floor, soaked my pants, and drenched my sneakers. The supervisor walked in, right at that moment. He said something in English, irritated, pointing at the clock, at the floor, at me. I didn't catch everything, but I understood the word slow. And the message too. I was slow, clumsy, replaceable. When he walked away, I crouched down right there on the wet floor, and for a few seconds I couldn't move. I felt a knot in my throat, a mix of anger and shame that burned more than the cleaning chemicals. I thought about everything I had left behind. How I sold my motorcycle, saved every coin, lied to myself saying it would be easier than it was. I thought about how I arrived with just $200, and a courage that now felt tiny inside me, like a candle about to burn out. That night, when I got back to the room, everyone was already asleep. I climbed into my bunk slowly, trying not to make a sound. Lying on my back, staring at the stained ceiling, I finally cried. I cried silently, with my face buried in the pillow so no one would hear. I cried for the girl I used to be, and for the woman I still wasn't sure I'd be able to become. I almost thought about giving up. Almost. But right in the middle of that swallowed-down cry, one of my mom's phrases came back like a hand grabbing mine. Daughter, we may be poor, But we weren't born to kneel to fear. I turned to my side, hugged my backpack, and touched the crumpled envelope with the bills from my first paycheck. It wasn't much, but it wasn't zero. I had nothing when I got here. Now I had this, and a weekly cleaning contract, and a body that was exhausted, but still alive. Somewhere inside me, a voice whispered, "It's little, but it's a start." I didn't know it yet, but that version of myself with cracked hands, clothes smelling like chemicals, and a heart in pieces, she was the woman who would learn to turn every humiliation into fuel. I was still the invisible cleaning girl, lost in a country that didn't speak my language. But that night, with my eyes burning and my pillow soaked, I made myself a promise for the first time. I had crossed an entire continent just to spend my whole life cleaning up after other people. I just had no idea how, or when, or with whom. All I had was that promise and a future that still felt too far away to even imagine. I don't know exactly when the routine started to weigh more than my own body, but somewhere in that second month, the nights began to taste like metal. I woke up before my alarm every day, heart racing, like I was already late, even though it was still the middle of the night. It felt like my body was learning how to live in permanent alert mode. One day, while I was cleaning an empty hallway, the strong smell of disinfectant made me so dizzy I had to put my hand on the wall to keep myself up. The fluorescent light flickered above me, the cleaning cart creaked slowly, and the world felt like it was drifting away, distant, blurry. I honestly thought I was going to pass out right there between the water fountain and the elevator. And a sharp question cut through my mind. Is this what my life is going to be forever? But sometimes life likes to place a door right in the middle of a hallway that used to be all walls. And that same day, I found mine. I was cleaning a room nobody ever used, a big room with books on the shelves and a leather armchair that looked way too expensive for someone like me to even touch. When I pushed the door open, I jumped. There was an older woman sitting inside, her white hair tied in a bun, a dark blue shawl over her shoulders. She had a book in her lap and thick-framed glasses. I froze in the doorway, convinced I had messed something up. "Oh, dear. I didn't expect anyone now," she said, her voice soft and worn by time. I didn't understand everything, but I understood enough to know she wasn't angry. Even so, I started apologizing fast, in Spanish, in broken English, in whatever my fear could push out of my mouth. "Sorry, ma'am. I clean. I can come later." She looked at me like she saw more than she was supposed to. There was a strange gentleness in her eyes. "You're new here, aren't you?" Just nodded. She pointed to the chair beside her. "Sit for a moment. You look exhausted. No one your age should look this tired." My whole body stiffened. Was it allowed to sit? Probably not. The supervisor had already made it clear we weren't paid to rest. But something about that woman, she had this silent, old authority, like the whole world obeyed her without her even trying. So I sat, just barely on the edge of the seat, bike straight. "What's your name?" "Mariella," I whispered. "I'm Mrs. Coleman. I've worked in this building for 26 years. I know every face that comes through here, and I haven't seen yours before." I tried to smile. I don't think it worked. She tilted her head, like she was trying to see straight into me. "You remind me of myself at your age. I worked too much, too." I also thought no one noticed. And when she said that, something inside me trembled, because it was true. I was living like a ghost, like I was nothing more than a pair of hands holding a mop. Mrs. Coleman closed her book and set it on the table. "Do you read?" I laughed. Not out of joy, but out of embarrassment. "In Spanish, a lot. Here, English, little." "English, little." She stood up slowly and walked to one of the shelves. She pulled out 3 thick, heavy, hardcover books. I assumed she was going to ask me to put them away, organize a Tim Dust something. But no. She placed the books on my lap. "Keep them." My eyes went wide. No, I can't. You can. And you should. These books taught me how businesses work, how people think, how money moves. If you're going to survive here, dear, you need to understand all 3. I held the books like they were made of glass. That simple gesture. A stranger giving me books felt impossible in a country where most people didn't even look me in the eyes. She touched my shoulder gently. Don't let this job swallow who you are. Hard work is good, but blind work, that one steals your soul. That sentence hit me like a blow. I felt the tears rising, but I swallowed them. I didn't want to cry in front of her. When I walked out of that room with the books heavy in my arms, something inside me had shifted. It wasn't big. It wasn't magical. It wasn't cinematic. It was a crack. A sliver, a small ray of light slipping into a place that had only been dark before. That night, lying on the bunk bed while the girls slept, I opened one of the books with trembling hands. The English words were hard. Some I didn't understand at all, but I felt something strange, the feeling that maybe I could be something other than a cleaning girl. I read until my eyes burned, and the next day, on the bus, I read again, and at lunch, hiding behind the cleaning cart, I read a few more pages. I read slowly, but I read. Every new word felt like opening a tiny door, a crack of future. A few weeks later, I was cleaning another empty room when I heard the supervisor talking to one of the managers. The manager was speaking loudly. The cleaning company we used before was a mess. Always late, kept forgetting rooms, didn't answer emails. We need a better team. The supervisor shrugged. Cleaning is all the same, just sweep and wipe. I heard that and felt a stab in my chest. Just sweep and wipe. As if our hands, our bodies, our hours scraped out of us in the cold were as replaceable as trash bags. But something new happened inside me. For the first time, that sentence didn't wound me. It challenged me. It called me out. Like someone had lit a spark, I thought about Mrs. Coleman. About the books. About the underlined pages. The chapters on organization, service, contracts, trust. I didn't understand everything yet, but I was starting to understand enough. On the way home, the cold wind hitting my face, I whispered to myself, if cleaning is all the same, then maybe someone needs to do it differently. That idea stuck in my head, like a seed planted without permission, lodged somewhere between fear and hope. I was no one. I had little English, little money, no degree, but for the first time since arriving, the thought of giving up felt cowardly. Because now I knew someone had seen me, and when someone sees you, you start seeing yourself too. Just divin. Note that this small gesture, 3 books placed on my lap, would become the first brick in the life I would one day build. The millionaire life that, back then, felt as far away as the sky I watched through the bus window. But destiny had already started moving its pieces, and I had no idea that soon I would stop cleaning offices and start cleaning the path to my own freedom. I used to think courage was something you felt before you acted, but I learned the truth. It's the opposite. You act fierce, trembling, unsure, almost quitting, and only later realize that what you did was courage. That realization began the day I decided I didn't want to be just another cleaner erasing footprints. I wanted to create something of my own, even if it was tiny. The idea was crooked, improvised, like almost everything in an immigrant's life. I kept Mrs. Coleman's books in my backpack every day, marked with pieces of bread wrappers I used as bookmarks. They talked about organization, service, trust, reputation, words I didn't fully understand yet. But they felt important. They felt powerful. I started paying attention to the companies where I cleaned. Some were a mess. Some had cleaning crews that barely showed up. Others constantly complained about the service. The manager's sentence kept echoing in my head. The cleaning company we used before was very disorganized. One night, sitting in the tiny kitchen of the apartment while one girl slept on the couch and another fried eggs to take to work, I grabbed a sheet of paper and wrote at the top, plans. I wrote it in Spanish, because anything in English felt too big for my hands. Under it, I wrote the boldest thing I had ever written. Start my own cleaning service. When I finished writing, I felt embarrassed, like I was lying to myself. I made too little, spoke too little English, was afraid of everything. What kind of person starts a business? Not someone like me. But still, I left those words there, staring right back at me. In the days that followed, I started working differently. I watched how the companies operated, how employees behaved, how the front desk treated people. I started adding small details to my work. Stacking papers in neat piles, folding the trash bags inward, straightening the chairs down to the centimeter. But it gave me something no one could take away. The feeling that even as a cleaning girl, I could do something professional. Not long after, the moment came that changed the rhythm of my life. He looked at the table, the floor, the chairs, then at me. He studied me for a few long seconds, like he was trying to figure out what had changed. "This looks better than usual," he said. I didn't know what to answer. I just stood there, holding the rag. "Did you do this?" he asked, pointing at the room's organization. I swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." He smiled. Small, subtle. "Good job. Very good. Very good." It was the first time an American praised something I did. It might sound small, but to me it was huge. It was like a crack had opened in the thick walls surrounding my life. On the bus back, I held the handrail with one hand and the book with the other. I was reading about value proposition, a hard term, but one I tried to decipher slowly, like taking a clock apart to understand how it works. Near the end of the chapter, there was a sentence Mrs. Coleman had underlined in the old book. "Destroy your client's problem, not their patience." It hit me like lightning. I understood. I really understood. Companies didn't want cleaners. They wanted peace. They wanted someone who solved things without becoming a problem themselves. Someone who did the basics like a professional. Someone who didn't aso a plate. Someone who didn't give them headaches. And I knew how to do that. I was already doing it. That same week, I made a decision that sent my heart beating all the way up to my throat. When the shift ended, I waited for the manager to leave the room and went after him. My hands were shaking. My feet felt like stone. My English was mediocre, but I knew that if I didn't speak right then, I'd never have the courage again. "Sir? Excuse me," I said, my voice so low it almost disappeared. He turned, surprised. "Yes, I want to give you something." My hands reached into my coat pocket. Inside was a piece of paper folded into four, damp from me holding it so tightly. I gave it to him. It was an improvised card, made from a sheet I grabbed secretly from the office. On it, I had written, "Mariella Cleaning. Reliable cleaning services. Phone. My scribbled number available for weekly contracts." The manager looked at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. He seemed confused. "You have a company?" My throat went dry, and the truth was, no, I didn't. No registration, no logo, no money, nothing. But I had drive, and more importantly, I had an opportunity that might never appear again. So I lied. For the first time since arriving in this country, I lied not to survive, but to move forward. "Yes, sir." Small company, very small. He seemed to think for a few seconds. "Are you available for a test job?" My heart exploded inside my chest. "Yes. Any time." He slipped the paper into his pocket. "I'll call you." When he turned away, my legs became so weak I had to lean against the wall. I didn't know if I had done the right thing or if I had just dug my own grave. If he really called, I'd be in trouble. I didn't have supplies, didn't have a cart, didn't have anything but my hands. That night, I told Diana what had happened. Her eyes went wide and she called me crazy. "Mariella, you can't open a business. You need paperwork, registration, money. You barely speak English." I knew all that, but still, something inside me refused to back down. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was on the bus. Unknown number. My hands were sweating so much, I almost dropped the phone. "Hello?" It was him. The manager. And he was offering me my first official job. A small office, 3 rooms, twice a week. Payment by check. When he hung up, I was so dizzy I didn't even notice I'd missed my stop. I just sat there hugging my backpack, feeling a nervous laugh climbing up my chest. I didn't have a company, but now I had a client. a client who believed I had a company. That night was split between panic and euphoria. I wrote plans, lists, scribbles of products I needed to buy. I had no money, but I had the week's paycheck. I used almost all of it to buy new buckets, white cloths, professional supplies. When the day came, I went alone. The key was waiting for me at the front desk. I got on my knees, washed, scrubbed, organized. I spent hours more than they asked because I wanted everything perfect. I wanted it to be impossible for them to hand me that key back with a no. And when I finished and turned off the lights, I felt something I hadn't felt since arriving in the United States. Pride. I was still a cleaning girl. Still sharing a tiny room. Still barely speaking English. But that day, for the first time, I had cleaned something that would become my own doorway, and I had no idea how much it would change my life. If I close my eyes today, I can still smell that office on the day I got my first payment as a company. The manager handed me the white envelope without ceremony, like it was just another routine transaction. For him, it was nothing. For me, it was the first physical proof that I could build something in this country. When I walked out through the glass door, the morning sun hit me like a spotlight. I held the envelope to my chest and walked to the bus stop as if I were carrying a treasure. And maybe I was, not for the amount itself, but for what it meant. It was the first time someone paid me not for my exhausted body, but for my initiative, for my courage, for my audacity. But destiny never likes to make things easy, and it was exactly during that moment, when I was finally starting to believe in myself, that everything almost collapsed. Getting that small office contract was just the beginning, but the manager had warned me from day one. If this works, I'll recommend you. People here talk. And he really did. 2 weeks later, I got another call. Then, another. For clients in a month. Calling that a company was ridiculous. But suddenly I had a tiny client list and no time left to sleep. I worked the night shift with the official cleaning team, then cleaned my clients' offices alone in the morning. 10 Renault Meso were head fast, ate whatever I had, and headed out again. My life became a loop of buckets, rags, buses, and back pain. But I was happy. Dazed, exhausted, but happy. Until reality knocked on my door, literally. One night, when I got home, there was a notice taped to the door. Rent increase. The girls and I looked at each other with that same expression people have when they already at their limit and realize the ground can still give out underneath them. The oldest, Estefania, put her hands on her head. This won't work, chicas. It just won't. I already send half my paycheck to my family. If rent goes up, I'll have to move somewhere else. I stared at the notice, then at the peeling walls, the uneven floor, the shaky bunk bed that creaked when I breathed. That place wasn't even worth what we already paid, but it was what we had, what our reality allowed. And still, I didn't want to live like that anymore. Something lit up inside me, a fever, a rush I couldn't explain. I couldn't keep being just another immigrant, barely surviving. I needed to grow fast. That's when I made the biggest and most necessary mistake of my life. I accepted an impossible contract. A bigger company, with multiple floors, needed a cleaning team to cover a 2-week emergency. The pay was good, better than anything I'd sent so far. But I didn't have a team. Primera vez, just me. When I hung up the phone, my hands were shaking like I had a fever. Diana looked at me and said, "Mariela, you're crazy. How are you going to clean that?" I didn't know, but I said yes. And now that yes felt like a stone tied to my chest. I needed people. People I could trust. People who needed work. That's how I decided, for the first time, to hire other immigrant women. I invited Estefania, the Colombian girl who shared the room with us, and 2 of her friends. They laughed when I said hire, like I had just told a joke. Hire what? Mariela, you don't even have a company, one of them said. But at that moment, I had something even more valuable: opportunity. An opportunity is a powerful currency among women who know hunger. I explained everything, drew out the plan on paper, divided shifts, wrote an improvised schedule. The truth was, I was terrified. I knew that if we failed, I'd ruin my reputation before I even had one. But if it worked, it would be my leap. On the first night, we all arrived together, for tired women carrying buckets and cloths stuffed inside old backpacks. The building looked enormous. The windows glowed. The hallways were spotless. The reception smelled like eucalyptus and money. I took a deep breath and said, "Chicas, we're not just going to clean. We're going to impress." They laughed nervously, but they worked like their lives depended on it because they did. I organized the team, assigned rooms, showed them exactly how I liked the details done, and while they cleaned, I moved from floor to floor, making sure everything was perfect. By 4 a.m, my body was begging for mercy. But I kept going. I kept going because that contract wasn't just work, it was access. It was credibility. It was a future. When we finished, before the first employee arrived, I looked around one last time. The carpet looked new. The desks glowed. The bathrooms smelled clean, but not harsh. Everything was spotless. Everything above expectations. I felt a warmth rise in my chest, a warmth that felt like pride. And maybe it was. But destiny doesn't like seeing an immigrant comfortable for too long. In the second week of the contract, I got an email that turned my blood to ice. It was from the company, written in formal English, asking about a registration number and business license. Documents I didn't have. Documents that could cost me everything. I felt the ground disappear. I showed the email to Estefania Letters. She went pale. "Mariella, this is serious. If you answer wrong, you'll lose the contract. If you answer right, you could have problems with the government." I was shaking. I had built a castle on matchsticks. One wrong breath and it would fall. I spent the rest of the day sitting on the floor of the room, laptop open, the emails staring back at me. And it was only at night, when everyone was asleep, that I remembered her. Mrs. Coleman. The woman who saw me before I learned to see myself. I grabbed the book she'd marked with notes and flipped to the chapter about formalizing services. It wasn't a full guide, more of a theory section. But, for the first time, I understood that I had to stop improvising. I needed to become a real company. The next morning, heart pounding, I went to the public library. I sat at a computer and started researching how to open a business in that state. The fees were expensive. The forms were complicated. Everything demanded English I didn't have. But for the first time, I didn't cry, because I finally had a reason. I wasn't just cleaning offices, I was cleaning the path out of poverty. And that same week, somewhere between fear, no money, and exhaustion, I did something that changed everything. I registered my company. For real. With documents. With a number. With an official name, Mariella Cleaning Services, LLC. When I held that printed certificate in my hands, I almost didn't recognize my own reality. It felt like someone had placed my name on a piece of the future. And when I sent that document to the contracting company, my whole body shook. One click of the mouse separated the terrified girl with $200 from the woman who was beginning to build an invisible empire. I just didn't know that with that single click, my destiny was about to turn a corner for good. I still remember the morning when everything truly changed. There was no dramatic music, no beam of light from the sky, no rehearsed announcement. Real life doesn't give you warning signs. It just keeps turning quietly until one day you look around and realize you reached somewhere else, somewhere that used to feel impossible. But before I got to that day, I had to go through the hardest part. The part where success knocks on your door, exactly when you're the most tired, almost as if it wants to test if you actually deserve it. After I registered the company, things started happening fast, almost too fast. I replied to emails using whatever English I had, sometimes clumsy, sometimes wrong, but always polite, always efficient. I arrived too early, left too late, slept too little, and lived with the constant fear that one mistake would make everything collapse. The women I hired began trusting me in a way that scared me. I didn't know how to lead. I had studied nothing except those worn-out books Mrs. Coleman gave me. And yet, they listened. Maybe because we were all the same kind of woman trying to survive in a country that wasn't built for us. Maybe because they saw the same desperation in my eyes that lived in theirs. The kind of desperation that doesn't back down. In just a few weeks, we closed 2 more small contracts. Then 3 medium ones. Then a big one. A contract that required 7 workers and equipment I didn't have money to buy. I spent nights researching used prices, financing options, discounts. I calculated everything 100 times on the little Bolivian calculator I had brought with me, the numbers already fading. I slept sitting up, slept on buses, slept in the tiny breaks between buildings. But I didn't give up. Primera could end. Primera could end. The building for the big contract was downtown. Tall glass, marble floors, perfect gray carpet, a fancy reception desk. The first time I walked in as a vendor, my hands were sweating. I looked around and remembered the girl who cleaned kitchens in Bolivia, thinking wealth was another galaxy. The first week went well. The second one went even better. And then, during the 3rd week, the inevitable happened. Problems. One employee didn't show up. Another quit. One of the machines broke. I ran everywhere. Cleaning rooms, organizing schedules, answering calls, trying to look calm while feeling like a pressure cooker ready to explode. At the end of a particularly chaotic night, I sat on the reception floor and cried. Not out of sadness, out of pure exhaustion. I thought about everything I had done. The money I risked. The nights I stayed awake. The pain in my body that got worse every day. The guilt of not calling my family as often as I wanted. The constant fear of losing everything. And it was in that same early morning that I got an unexpected message. Mrs. Coleman passed by and asked about you. The receptionist at her building had sent it casually, like she didn't know how deeply it would hit me. Mrs. Coleman still remembered me. The woman who put books in my lap. The first person who said I looked like someone who could lead. That morning, after my shift ended, I went to the old building. I wanted to see her. I wanted to tell her I was trying to honor what she saw in me. But she wasn't there. The receptionist said she'd retired for good. Moved to another city. I stood there holding my little improvised badge, feeling a mix of sadness and gratitude. I never thanked her the way I should have. But maybe life had other plans for that thank you. As time passed, the company grew. I hired more women. I rented a small storage unit for supplies. I bought simple but decent uniforms. I started organizing schedules on colorful spreadsheets. I learned how to write formal contracts. And little by little, companies started coming to me not because I charged cheap prices, but because they knew I didn't fail. The word that showed up the most in my emails was just one. Trust. Confidence. Me. The girl who crossed the border, with $200 in fear, now stood as a name people trusted. But life still had one moment waiting for me. A moment I'll never forget. It was late afternoon, after 2 years of working, like my body was made of iron, when I received an unexpected invitation, a business meeting with the director of a large office complex. The kind of contract that could triple my revenue. I put together a blue folder, wore my best shirt, the same one I used for cleaning job interviews, and tied my hair back. Inside the mirrored elevator, I kept repeating to myself, "You belong here. You belong here. You belong here?" When I walked into the conference room, something happened that I never could be. Shen Kumin. The director stood up, reached out his hand, and said, "Mrs. Coleman recommended you years ago. Said you had something special." I never forgot that. I froze. That woman, without even knowing, had paved the road for me long before I realized it. And there, in that elegant room, while I presented my work plan, I felt a warmth rise through my face. It wasn't embarrassment. It was something much bigger. It was the feeling that all the loose threads of my life were finally tying together. I signed the contract that same day. A big one. A contract that officially turned me into a small, but solid business owner. When I walked out of the building, the cold wind hit my face. I took a deep breath. I looked up. The sky was clear. And right there, in that simple moment, I realized I had already crossed the line. The invisible line between survival and future. Between fear and possibility. Between cleaner and entrepreneur. I would still work hard. Still face obstacles. Still have bad nights. But I had done the impossible. I had seen myself when no one else did. I had turned loneliness into courage. Pain into discipline. Lack into creativity. I had built, with my own cracked hands, the life the girl with $200 would never have dared to dream. And that evening, when I walked back to the bus stop where everything began, I touched the pocket of my coat and felt the symbolic weight of the keys to the buildings I now managed. I smiled. Alone. Steady. Whole. And I whispered, sealing my fate, I'm not the invisible cleaning girl anymore. I'm the woman who cleaned her way to her own freedom. The end.